A young man lived with his father and mother. "Son," the old man said to the young man one day, "you are our only child. You must marry and have children." So the old man found a wife for his son. She was a fine young woman, and her young husband loved her. A year passed, and she gave birth to a little boy. The family lived happily together, but they were very poor. The young man and his father worked hard in the fields. The young woman and her mother-in-law worked hard in the house. But they never had enough food to eat. "Father," the young man said to his father one day, "this little farm is too small for our family. Let me go and find work in the town. I will earn some money and bring it home to you." The father was sad. "You are my only child," he said, "and we need you here at home. But you are right. The farm is too small for us all. Go to the town, find work, and earn some money. We will wait for you here at home." So the young man kissed his son and said goodbye to his parents and his wife. He began the long journey to the town. He traveled for 2 days, and at last he came to the town. He stopped at the first big house and knocked on the door. A man opened it. "Is there work for me here?" the young man asked. "No, my friend," the man said. The young man walked on. He wanted many houses and knocked on many doors. His question was always the same. "Do you have work for me here?" he said. The answer was always the same, too. "No," everyone said. "There is no work for you here." The young man was tired now and very hungry. "What can I do?" he thought. "I must find work soon, or I will die." At last he came to a monastery. He knocked on the door and an old monk opened it. "Please, Father," the young man said, "let me work for you." "How long will you stay?" the monk asked. "For a few months only," answered the young man. "Then I must go back to my family." The monk began to shut the door. "Then I can't help you," he said. "If you work for us, you must promise to stay for a long time. If I don't find work today, I'll die of hunger," the young man thought. "Father," he said, "please don't close the door. I promise to work for you for a long time." The monk smiled at him. "Come in, my son," he said. The next day, the young man began to work. The work was not difficult. The monks were kind to him. The young man worked hard for them, and they were pleased with him. A month passed. At first, the young man thought about his family every day. "Is my son well?" he thought. "Are my parents happy? Does my wife have enough food to eat?" But slowly, the young man forgot his family. He was happy with the monks. "You are an honest man," they said to him. "You can look after our money for us. We will trust you." The years passed quickly. One day, the young man was sitting on his chair in the monastery. He was counting the monks' money. Suddenly, he heard voices. Children were laughing outside. The young man looked up. "They are happy," he thought. "Is my son happy?" He stood up and looked out of the window. "How old is my son now?" he thought. "How long have I been here? 5 years? 6 years? No, 10 years. I have been here for 10 years. The next morning, the young man went to see the monks. I have stayed with you for 10 years, he said. And I have been a good servant. I have worked hard for you, but you have never paid me. Now I want to see my family. Please give me the money you owe me, and let me go. The monks smiled at him. You're right, they said. You have worked hard for us. Now you can choose. Do you want us to give you your money, or do you want us to give you our blessing? The young man frowned. I want your blessing, he said. But I want my money, too. We owe you 400 silver dollars, the monks said. But each blessing costs $100. The young man looked unhappy, but at last he said, Give me your blessing. It is better than the money, so the first monk blessed him. Do not leave the road, he said. Do not go to the right or the left. Only go straight on. The second monk blessed him. Soon you will be a guest, he said. Obey your host. Take what he gives you. Then the third monk blessed him. Do not be angry, he said. Always think before you act. Then the monks gave the young man 100 silver dollars. And the young man left the monastery. Soon he met two men. They were walking along the road together. Walk with us, they said. We'll talk together and our journey will be more interesting. The young man agreed, and the three men walked on together. Soon they came to a crossroads. Follow me, one of the men said. I'll show you a better path, and he turned to the left and began to walk along a different way. The other men followed him, but the young man remembered the first monk's blessing. Do not go to the left or the right. The first monk had said, Only go straight on. The young man smiled at his new friends. I'm sorry, he said. I cannot go with you. I must go straight on. He said goodbye to the two men and went on down the road. He crossed the river and walked up the next hill. Suddenly he heard shouts. He looked back across the river. He could see the two men. They were shouting for help. Robbers were attacking them. He wanted to go back and help his friends, but there were many robbers, and they were big and strong. If I go down there, they'll kill me, he thought. He was grateful to the monks. The first blessing saved my life. It saved me from the robbers, he thought. He went on down the road. He walked for a long time. He was hungry and thirsty now, and he was tired too. It will soon be dark, he thought. I must find a place to sleep. He looked round. He was in a wild place. There were no houses here. He was frightened of hyenas and leopards. He began to walk faster. It was dark now. I must find a place to sleep, the young man thought. At last he saw a light in the distance. He ran towards it. The light came from a little house on a hill. The young man ran up to it and knocked on the door. At once an old man opened it. He had white hair and he wore fine, white clothes. You were welcome. Come in, the old man said. The young man followed him into the house. Sit down, said the old man. Wait here. I will fetch some water and wash your feet. The young man felt ashamed. I can't let this noble old man wash my feet, he thought. The old man went away to fetch the water. Soon he came back. The young man wanted to take the water out of his hands. He wanted to wash the old man's feet, but then he remembered the monk's second blessing. Obey your host, the second monk had said, take what he gives you. So the young man sat down and the old man washed his feet. Then the old man clapped his hands and a young girl came into the room. She was carrying a dish of delicious food. Feed our guest, the old man said to the girl. The girl did not move and the young man saw that she was blind. The old man pushed her towards the young man. Feed him, he said again, so the girl fed the young man and he ate well. Then he lay down to rest and he slept all night. He woke up early in the morning. Thank you, he said to his host. You have been very kind to me, but now I must go on. The sun was up now and the young man could see his host clearly. The old man did not look fine and noble now. Teeth were long and white and sharp. His eyes were small and cruel. Is he a man or is he an ogre? The young man thought. You're lucky, the old man said. You didn't refuse my hospitality. I wanted to wash your feet and you accepted. I gave you food and you ate it. Many people have come to my house. They didn't let me wash their feet and they didn't accept my food. I killed them all. He pointed to the ground. Their bodies are under your feet, he said. The young man was very frightened. But the girl, the blind girl, he said, why didn't you kill her? The old man laughed. I took her eyes, he said. I made her blind and now she is my servant. I must go, the young man thought. I must get away from this terrible man. He is mad. Thank you, goodbye. Thank you. God bless you. He said quickly and he began to walk away. But the old man called him back. Wait, he said. I have something for you. He went back into his house and came out again. He was carrying a sack. Take it, he said. The young man took the sack and ran away down the road. The sack was very heavy. At last he stopped under a tree and opened it. Dollars, he said. Silver dollars. He tried to count them but he couldn't. There were too many of them. The monk saved my life again, he thought. And their second blessing has made me rich too. He went on quickly down the road. My dear parents and my wife will be very happy, he thought. I can look after them well now. He walked for a long time. The sun was high in the sky and he was hot and tired. But he knew this road well. He knew the trees and the rocks and the little streams. He was nearly home. He came to a church by the side of the road. A crowd was standing there. They were watching an old man and a boy. The man and the boy were fighting. The young man felt very angry. What a wicked boy, he thought. He is showing no respect to that poor old man. He wanted to run up to the boy and beat him with his stick. But then he remembered the monk's third blessing. Do not be angry, they had said. Always think before you act. He turned to the woman next to him. What's happening? He said. Who is this old man and this boy? Why are they fighting? It's a sad story, the woman said. These people are very poor. The old man is the boy's grandfather. 10 years ago, His son left him because he wanted to find work in the town. The old man had no one to help him. He has been very unhappy. He wanted to kill himself. His grandson is trying to stop him. Tears came into the young man's eyes. "Oh my father, oh my child," he shouted. He pushed his way through the crowd. He took the young boy's arm and looked into his eyes. "My son," he said. The old man had fallen to the ground. The young man helped him to stand again. "Father," he said. The old man looked at him. "Is it really you?" he said. "Have you really come home again?" "Yes, father," the young man said, "and I'll never leave you again." The young man went to his house with his father and his son. His mother and his wife kissed him. But then they began to cry. "You have come home only to die," they said. "We have no food here. We ate our last meal yesterday." The young man opened his sack and showed them the silver dollars. Then he added to it the $100 that the monks had given him. "I haven't come home to die, but to live," he said. "The monks have blessed me and we will be happy now for the rest of our lives." There was a man who had 3 sons. The youngest of whom was considered very silly, and everybody used to mock him and make fun of him. The eldest son wanted to go and cut wood in the forest, and before he left home, his mother prepared beautiful pancakes and a bottle of wine for him to take with him, so that he might not suffer from hunger or thirst. As he entered the forest, he met a gray old man who bade him good morning and said, "Give me a little piece of cake out of your basket and a drop of wine out of your bottle. For I am very hungry and thirsty." But the clever son replied, "What? Give you my cake and my wine? Why, if I did, I should have none for myself. Not I, indeed, so take yourself off." And he left the man standing and went on. The young man began cutting down a tree, but it was not long before he made a false stroke. The axe slipped and cut his arm so badly that he was obliged to go home and have it bound up. Now this false stroke was caused by the little gray old man. Day the second son went into the forest to cut wood, and his mother gave him a cake and a bottle of wine. As he entered the wood, the same little old man met him and begged for a piece of cake and a drop of wine, but the second son answered rudely, "What I might give to you I shall want myself, so be off." Then he left the little old man standing in the road and walked on. His punishment soon came. He had scarcely given 2 strokes on a tree with his axe, when he hit his leg such a terrible blow that he was obliged to limp home in great pain. Then the stupid son said to his father, "Let me go for once and cut wood in the forest." But his father said, "No, your brothers have been hurt already, and it would be worse for you who don't understand wood cutting." The boy, however, begged so hard to be allowed to go that his father said, "There, get along with you. You will buy your experience very dearly, I expect." His mother, however, gave him a cake which had been made with water and baked in the ashes and a bottle of sour beer. When he reached the wood, the very same little old man met him, and after greeting him kindly said, "Give me a little of your cake and a drop from your bottle. For I am very hungry and thirsty." "Oh," replied the simple youth, "I have only a cake which has been baked in the ashes and some sour beer, but you are welcome to share of it. Let us sit down and eat and drink together." So they seated themselves, and lo and behold, when the youth opened his basket to cake, had been turned into a beautiful cake, and the sour beer into wine. After they had eaten and drank enough, the little old man said, "Because you have been kind-hearted and shared your dinner with me, I will make you in future lucky in all you undertake. There stands an old tree. Cut it down and you will find something good at the root." Then the old man said farewell and left him. The youth set to work and very soon succeeded in felling the tree. When he found sitting at the roots a goose, whose feathers were of pure gold, he took it up, and instead of going home carried it with him to an inn at a little distance where he intended to pass the night. The landlord had 3 daughters who looked at the goose with envious eyes. They had never seen such a wonderful bird and longed to have at least one of its feathers. "Ah," thought the eldest, "I shall soon have an opportunity to pluck one of them." And so it happened, for not long after the young man left the room, she instantly went up to the bird and took hold of its wing. But as she did so, the finger and thumb remained and stuck fast. In a short time after, the second sister came in with the full expectation of gaining a golden feather, but as she touched her sister to move her from the bird, her hand stuck fast to her sister's dress, and neither of them could free herself. At last, in came the third sister with the same intention. keep away," screamed the other 2. "In heaven's name, keep away." But she could not imagine why she should keep away. If they were near the golden bird, why should not she be there? So she made a spring forward and touched her second sister, and immediately she also was made a prisoner, and in this position they were obliged to remain by the goose all night. In the morning, the young man came in and took the goose on his arm and went away without troubling himself about the 3 girls, who were following close behind him. And as he walked quickly, they were obliged to run one behind the other, left or right of him, just as he was inclined to go. In the middle of a field, they were met by the parson of the parish, who looked without wonder at the procession as it came near him. "Shame on you," he cried out. "What are you about? You bold-faced hussies, running after a young man in that way through the fields. Go home, all of you." He placed his hand on the youngest to pull her back, but the moment he touched her, he also became fixed, and was obliged to follow and run like the rest. In a few minutes, the clerk met them. And when he saw the parson running after the girls, he wondered greatly and cried out, "Hello, Master Parson! Where are you running in such haste? Have you forgotten that there is a christening today?" And as the procession did not stop, he ran after it and seized the parson's gown. In a moment he found that his hand was fixed, and he also had to run like the rest, and now there were 5 trotting along, one behind the other. Presently 2 peasants came by with their sickles from the field. The parson called out to them, and begged them to come and release him and the clerk. Hardly had they touched the clerk, when they also stuck fast as the others, and the simpleton with his golden goose traveled with the 7. After a while they came to a city in which reigned the king, who had a daughter of such a melancholy disposition that no one could make her laugh. Therefore he issued a decree that whoever would make the princess laugh should have her in marriage. Now, when the simple youth heard this, he ran before her, and the whole 7 trotted after him. The sight was so ridiculous that the moment the princess saw it, she burst into a violent fit of laughter, and they thought she would never leave off. After this, the youth went to the king and demanded his daughter in marriage, according to the king's decree. But His Majesty did not quite like to have the young man for a son-in-law, so he said that before he would consent to the marriage, the youth must bring him a man who could drink all the wine in the king's cellar. The simpleton went into the forest, for he thought, if anyone can help me, it is the little gray man. When he arrived at the spot where he had cut down the tree, there stood a man with a very miserable face. The youth asked him why he looked so sorrowful. "Oh!" he exclaimed. "I suffer such dreadful thirst that nothing seems able to quench it, and cold water I cannot endure. I have emptied a cask of wine already, but it was just like a drop of water on a hot stone." "I can help you," cried the young man. "Come with me, and you shall have your fill. I promise you." Upon this he led the men into the king's cellar, where he opened the casks one after another, and drank till his back ached, and before the day closed he had quite emptied the king's cellar. Again the young man asked for his bride, but the king was annoyed at the thought of giving his daughter to such a common fellow, and to get rid of him he made another condition. He said that no man should have his daughter who could not find someone able to eat up a whole mountain of bread. Away went the simpleton to the forest as before, and there in the same place sat a man, binding himself round tightly with a belt, and making the most horrible faces. As the youth approached he cried, "I have eaten a whole oven full of rolls, but I have eaten a whole oven full of rolls, but it has not satisfied me a bit. I am as hungry as ever, and my stomach feels so empty that I am obliged to bind it round tightly, or I should die of hunger." The simpleton could hardly contain himself for joy when he heard this. "Get up," he exclaimed, "and come with me, and I will give you plenty to eat, I warrant." So he led him to the king's court where His Majesty had ordered all the flour in the kingdom to be made into bread and piled in a huge mountain. The hungry man placed himself before the bread and began to eat, and before evening the whole pile had disappeared. Then the simpleton went a third time to the king and asked for his bride. But the king made several excuses, and at last said that if he could bring him a ship that would travel as well by land as by water, then he should without any further conditions marry his daughter. The youth went at once straight to the forest and saw the same old gray man to whom he had given his cake. "Ah," he said, as the youth approached, "it was I who sent the men to eat and drink, and I will also give you a ship that can travel by land or by sea, because when you thought I was poor you were kind-hearted and gave me food and drink." The youth took the ship, and when the king saw it he was quite surprised, but he could not any longer refuse to give him his daughter in marriage. The wedding was celebrated with great pomp, and after the king's death the simple woodcutter inherited the whole kingdom and lived happily with his wife.
Once there was an old man in Burma who had a daughter. He was very happy when she married a nice young man who came from a good family. At first everything went well, but after a little while there was a problem. The young husband wanted to be an alchemist. He spent all his time trying to turn dirt into gold. He was sure that this way they could one day be rich without working. Night and day he dreamt of finding the secret of the alchemists. He also spent a lot of money trying to find a way to make his dream come true. After some months like this there was very little money. The young wife decided to talk to her husband. "Husband, why don't you try to find a job? Trying to make us rich fast has left us with no money at all," she said to him one day. "But can't you see that I'm very near to finding the secret?" He replied, "When I know how to turn dirt into gold, we'll be richer than you can ever imagine." Perhaps it was true that he was always very near to finding the secret, but he never found it. After many weeks, life became more and more difficult. Sometimes there were days when there was no money for food in the house. So the young wife went to talk to her father. The father was surprised to hear that his son-in-law wanted to be an alchemist. He asked to speak to the young man the next day. "My daughter has told me about your plants," he said to his son-in-law. "When I was young, I too wanted to be an alchemist." The younger man was very happy. Here at last was someone who could understand his dream. The father-in-law asked about the young man's work, and the two of them started talking about different ways of trying to turn dirt into gold. After 2 hours talking about the things that an alchemist must do, the old man jumped to his feet. "You've done everything that I did when I was a young man," he shouted. "I'm sure you're very near to finding the great secret. But you need one more special thing to change dirt into gold. And I only learned about this a few days ago." "One more special thing?" asked the son-in-law. He found talking with the old man more and more interesting. "Yes, that's right. But I'm too old to do this job," he said. "It's a lot of work and I can't do it now." "I can do it, father-in-law," shouted the young man. "Perhaps you can," said the old man. His voice was suddenly quiet. "Listen carefully. The special thing is a silver powder that grows on the back of the leaves of the banana plant. This is a magic powder." "Magic powder?" asked the son-in-law. "What do you mean?" "Listen," replied the older man. "To get this powder, you must plant bananas. Lots of bananas. And you must plant them yourself. While you plant each banana seed, you must say special magic words. Then when the plant grows, you'll see the magic silver powder on the leaves." "How much magic powder do we need?" the young man asked at once, very interestingly. 1 kilogram. The old man replied. 1 kilogram. We'll need hundreds of banana plants for that. "Yes," said the old man. "And that's why I can't do the work myself, I'm afraid." "Don't worry," said the young man. "I'll do it." And so the old man taught his son-in-law the magic words and gave him enough money to start planting the bananas. The next day, the young man bought a field. He planted the banana seeds, just as the old man told him to do. He quietly said the magic words, while each seed went into the ground. Each day, he looked carefully at the little plants. He made sure that there were no banana flies on them. When the bananas came, he carefully took the silver powder off the banana leaves and put it into a special bag. The banana plants grew quickly and the young man worked hard every day. The only problem was that on each plant, there was very little silver powder. So the young man had to buy more fields and plant more bananas. It took 7 years. But at last, the young man had 1 kilogram of silver powder. He ran to his father-in-law's house. "I've got enough magic powder," he shouted. "Wonderful," replied the old man. "Now, I can show you how to turn dirt into gold. But first, your wife must come here. We need her too." When she arrived, the old man asked his daughter, While your husband was getting the banana powder, what did you do with the bananas? I sold them in the market, the daughter said. We've lived on that money for these 7 years. Did you save any money? Asked the father. Yes, she replied. And I see it. Asked the old man. So his daughter hurried home and came back with 10 big bags. The old man opened them and saw that they were full of gold. He took all the coins out of one of the bags and put them on the floor. Then he took the banana powder and put it next to the gold. You see? He said, turning to his son-in-law. You've changed dirt into gold. So you are an alchemist in a way, after all. And what's more, you're now a very rich man.